Welcome to Kennedy Saves the World, and today, once again, I'm going to attempt to save California. It has become a total impossibility, but I won't stop trying because we have this massive recall that's looming in the fall, and that means if Californians answer the first of two questions, whether or not current Governor Gavin Newsom should be recalled and replaced, if they say yes, 50% plus one, then he's done. The next question is, who should replace him? Well, there are a lot of interesting people who have lined up for the job, including John Cox, who ran against Newsom last time around, and of course, Caitlyn Jenner. And I've talked about her on this podcast. I like some of her ideas. But in reading about some of the other candidates, I found out that some of her ideas, although they are well-intentioned, they are a little vague. And I always like when people think through things and think broadly and deeply about what could fix a place like California. California is incredibly special. It is beautiful. It is the laboratory of creativity still in this country, although a lot of people are moving away and a lot of creative people and rich people are moving away. Ultimately, long-term, that's going to be bad for the state. So this is a critical junction where someone who leads the state is going to have to think about things in a different way because the way they've been doing it, it hasn't been working. So what kind of person will that be? Will it be a typical cookie-cutter Democrat politician? The California has been a factory for pumping narcissists out who are big government people, but they are short on imagination. And I would lump Gavin Newsom, Eric Garcetti, Kamala Harris into that category, which is, ultimately self-congratulatory but uninspired. So when I started talking to different candidates and reading through different plans, the person who has stood out the most so far to me is actually a YouTuber. He's made his name and his fortune on YouTube and in real estate. He gives financial advice. He does these great videos on YouTube. You can look him up. Meet Kevin. His name is Kevin Paffrath, and he joins me now. Welcome to Kennedy Saves the World, Kevin.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving me another opportunity to speak with you. This is so exciting. You are so right as well. People have been vague, and especially Gavin Newsom, for 17 years. We need details, very specific solutions, and the people to vote on a mandate to get rid of the narcissists and fix California.
So all of your solutions are well thought out. They may not all be perfect, but I do like where you're coming from. So let's tackle the biggest one first. And this is the biggest one outside of the pandemic, and that is homelessness. Because what happens with especially ultra-liberal politicians is, they tend to look at the homeless as victims, and they want to throw a bunch of money at homeless programs, which ultimately don't work. They don't have the right solutions. And then what you have is a proliferation of more homelessness. What would your plan be to tackle the homeless crisis all throughout California?
You're so right on. I mean, what you really have, the way to picture this is, imagine you have a windshield and somebody just whacked it with a hammer and it's all glued together, but it's all shattered. That's what California looks like right now, and that's what the homeless programs you're talking about look like. It's all a fragmented mess of a disaster, and people are being asked to go to a certain facility for mental health and a certain facility for an evaluation, and here's a phone so we can track you and check in with you, and you got to go over there to the food bank, but you can't take it back to where you are on the street. You got to eat it here. It's a disaster. I can't even wrap my head around all of these different programs. How is somebody in despair going to be able to do that? So here's the solution. Day one of my administration, I will declare a state of emergency for homelessness, along with 3 others. We'll talk homelessness now. And included in that action will be deploying the National Guard on day one. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to provide clothing, 3 meals a day, access to toilets, showers, basic human needs for everyone who is on our streets. We're going to make sure everyone is safe as well. No more rapes, no more beatings, no more people dying on our streets, and no more concerned public walking around feeling unsafe. That's going to stop day one when the National Guard rolls out wherever there are homeless folks in need. We're going to show compassion for the first 30 days and help the people who are living on the streets. At the same time, we're going to be building facilities with the National Guard throughout the state. So it's one movement. And we're going to build our own facilities. We're going to do it in partnership with businesses and homeless programs. Maybe they'll have assignments. We'll have mental health sections, psychological sections, detox sections, resident sections, but most importantly, shelter. And we'll give folks an option of coming to these after 30 days when we get these buildings constructed. If we can build in Afghanistan and war zones, we can solve homelessness in California. Problem is, we got Baby Newsom who wants to throw money at the problem and say, no, this is a 5-year problem. No, it's not. People are dying on the street. It's an emergency. It ends, and nobody's on my street anymore without shelter 60 days. In my first 60 days in office.
Well, I would like to see that because a lot of parts of Los Angeles County are totally, I mean, they're not only unlivable, you can't get down sidewalks. And the ACLU has been fighting to make sure these homeless encampments can stay. And they don't just stay. They grow, and there are fires, and you're absolutely right. There is rape and violence, and it so much goes unchecked. And then you have the working homeless who are the last to get any services. So, I like the idea because you have to have some form of temporary shelter because, all the homeless advocates, they look down their noses at tiny homes and multifamily dwellings or even, yurts and pop-up shelters that we do build for refugees in war zones. And we do have to think of it differently. I also like the idea you had about legalized gambling. So could legalized gambling work throughout the state and not just on reservations? Or is it something that, we like gambling because we have to go somewhere kind of far away and it makes it special, and there are nightclubs and, there are all sorts of fancy people in residence like Britney Spears and Elton John. Does that only work in Vegas? Like, how would that work if the market was flooded with casinos in California?
Well, I think the perfect case study is Vegas itself. Look at the people who live in Vegas. They have the opportunity, if they want, to go to some of the most fun shows, the most fun and delicious and high-end restaurants. They can go to very inexpensive restaurants if they want and have excellent food as well. There are plenty of food courts, cafeterias, options. There's fun. There are street shows that are totally free as well. There's so many things that congregate around casino because guess what? Casino is business. And what comes around business? People, because people like having fun. People like the opportunity to spend money. We're not trying to create a gambling culture. What we're trying to create is an opportunity for people to say, hey, I want to do something, but I don't want to clog up the freeways. I don't want to travel somewhere. I only got Saturday and Sunday because maybe I got to go back to work. Hey, you know what? Let's just go to the casino Friday and Saturday night and oh wow, great, it's only 10, 15 minutes away from our home. We don't have to leave the state. Now we're keeping more business revenues within the state. What I want is people to stop leaving to Nevada. I want that to happen here. Now regarding reservations, look, there are going to be negotiations made, and there are going to be public negotiations too. No more backdoor contracts, first of all, in the state of California. I'm sick of that. That's how you get a high-speed rail where Gavin Newsom's buddies and friends are getting big payouts behind closed doors. We need transparency and negotiation, and we're going to strike win-win deals that are logical for Californians.
I'm so glad you brought up high-speed rail because what happens is, Californians are sold a bill of goods. Like, okay, we can take you from LA to San Francisco on a high-speed train in under 3 hours. That sounds amazing. I mean, that's something that you could do in the afternoon, get there for dinner, and be home later that night. It sounds incredible. It's never going to happen, but what does happen is you get part of the track built, and they know they've got you over a barrel because they just appealed to pass another bond measure. Like, all we need is another $90 billion. And you have these atrocious cost overruns for rail lines that are neither high speed nor are they traveling to dense population centers like we are originally promised. So what do you do about, mass transit and making it faster? And what do you do about traffic?
Great question. Well, here's the thing. The high-speed rail is a classic economical argument of the sunk cost fallacy. People believe, well, we've already spent so much, let's just allocate the other $90 billion. It's illogical, though, because we don't need it. Not only don't we need it, but it's way too expensive. $125 million per mile of high-speed rail. We can build tunnels for $10 million per mile. So not only are we getting reamed, spending 12 and a half times the amount of money we should, because politicians with no business acumen or sense of a budget, because they get big donations from Facebook or whatever, and they don't need to think about running a budget. They just need to think about, oh, where's my next bailout? They don't understand business. So first of all, that stops. All this nonsense stops with me. This wasted money stops. The high-speed rail stops. As wonderful as it sounds to get from LA to San Francisco, I would rather have a Google at San Francisco and a Google in LA and one in San Diego and one in Ventura. And we're going to help allow these facilities to be built so that people don't have to travel. Because look, nobody wants to go on a 3-hour train ride. Now, 3 hours in a day commute is a lot too. So we don't need people going back and forth up and down our state. We need a better government that gets out of the way and lets building happen in more areas. But you asked the specific question of how do we solve the existing traffic problems we have? Well, the first thing we do is we look at the heat map. We look at where are the traffic problems. And the first thing we do there is we build tunnels specifically under the densest areas. Tunnels for cars and buses. Those tunnels can then accommodate folks, whether it's through a toll road as an option for folks or not. I'm a fan of toll roads, but they have to be optional toll roads. So for example, if you have the 405, put toll tunnels underneath them. So if somebody wants to pay to go in the tunnel, great. But if somebody can't afford it, then don't. So you have the option. That's what they do in Texas and Florida. It works great. The toll roads are beautiful. They're pristine. That's what we got to have in California. That's going to help a lot. In some areas, it might make sense to see if we can get tunnels for bus loops or some forms of public transit. The problem with LA, though, for example, that works in maybe San Francisco with the BART. But the problem with LA is it's very spread out. So I prefer tunnels for both cars and buses, though we'll do research on that. The first priority, though, is put more roads where the heat maps are. And then toll roads are a number one priority. Optional toll roads, of course.
Yeah, I would take the option. If the 405 is completely jammed, give me a little side hustle I can get down. I'll pay an extra $15 if it's going to save me an hour in traffic. It's absolutely insane. And again, I think you talk about the backroom deals rather in terms of high-speed rail, but it's the same thing with every other form of mass transit and with highways and everything else. There's so much cronyism in the state. Do you really want to be governor of California, or is this a way for you to use your poli-sci degree to raise your profile to get more YouTube subscribers?
No, it's a fair critique, totally fair critique. My interest in anybody who watches my channel and has watched me regularly knows my interest is helping people. And if there's anything I learned with my poli-sci degree, it's that to live a good life, you have to serve and you have to help. And I get inspired and excited by helping people. The biggest thing that I believe we can do in government is, first of all, providing the options for folks to help themselves. Let the government get out of the way. Get the government out of clogging up building and safety processes so we can develop and have more affordable housing. Give folks the option of sending their children to a future school so they can graduate not being burdened by student debt.
Explain what that is, because the future school, as you lay it out in your plans, as a parent who likes sort of, the idea of non-traditional school choice, I think it's really smart because we've gotten so off track drilling into late adolescence that you have to go to college right after high school. And sometimes, people don't have the intellectual curiosity or the emotional maturity for that setting. And it's setting them up for disaster because they're saddled with student loans that take decades to pay off. And a lot of times, if you're bored, if you're not invested, you're not going to finish. And the whole process was really for nothing because it's not very impressive on your resume if you put, I completed 1 year of college. That says nothing about your follow through to your boss. So the idea that you combine something that is, somewhat of a university setting and trade schools. I don't think, we talk about that a lot here at Fox. We talk about it with Mike Rowe and other people, but trade schools are a phenomenal option for lots and lots of people in high school who have, they haven't been exposed to the idea. So how do future schools sort of wrap all of that together?
Yeah, here's the beautiful thing. Because we're going to take action from the state level, and we can do, one of my emergency actions is declaring a state of emergency in schooling. This gives us the option to clear this path, and I'm very transparent about my plans. By having future schools as a choice for folks, some folks wonder, well, does that mean if we go into a future school, it's going to be harder for us to get into a university? The beautiful thing that we can do at the state level, and I'm going to touch on future schools in a second, but the beautiful thing we can do is we can say at the state level, if you go to our future school and you decide you want to enroll in one of our universities, we can make that happen based on your performance in the future school. We don't need an SAT to place you at UCLA, Berkeley, or Santa Barbara because these are our schools. These are public institutions of the state of California, so we have control over that. The beautiful thing, what we can do now, is we can give people the assurance that they can make the choice. If it's not for them, fine. But what future schools are the opportunity for somebody at 14 years old to learn a financial education, a language education, a communications education, sales, trade school, boot camp style work. All of these will be choice-based, but we're going to start with a mandatory rubric of financial education communication. Those are very important that don't get taught today. Business communication.
No one learns that. And I'm telling you, the kids today, they don't know about personal finance. I remember learning how to write a check when I was a sophomore in high school in my personal finance class. And if I hadn't been taught that then, I would never have learned. And I would have just been writing giant X's in crayon in my checkbook. Sure.
Well, and it's just the problem is it's not part of the regular curriculum now. There are occasionally classes we can take, but there's no regular curriculum that integrates wealth building. As much as it's wonderful that we got check writing done, we got to get to the level where folks recognize compound interest, the importance of good credit, good leverage versus bad leverage. There's so much to learn, and this could be taught over 4 years in a future school. So that way, when people are 18, not only do they graduate debt-free, not only do they graduate able to get a career at a local company like Patagonia or Amgen, a mid-sized business, or maybe even they go to a mega like an Apple, a Google, or Facebook, whatever they want. We can work with those companies to learn companies. What is it that you need? What kind of workers do you need? Teach our teachers. Now we're going to have more educated teachers who can get paid more money teaching our students financial education and these skills so they're actually employable in our state. And then we encourage those businesses, incentivize, partially mandate, I don't know, we'll figure that out, those businesses to keep our students here. Because the last thing we want is to, and this is how California works right now, and this is what's so toxic about California, and this is horrible, is we educate people in California, and then they get a job, and they're like, wait a minute, why am I living in California?
Yeah, I can't afford to live here. I'm going to Texas. Yes, absolutely. They're going to Texas. They're going to Nevada. They're going to Arizona. They're going pretty much everywhere but California because it is too expensive to start out in that state. So they take their great ideas and their brand new degree and they go somewhere else. And it's a real problem. The other problem that you will run into is the teachers' unions, the prison guards unions, firefighters unions. I mean, there are public sector unions run California. A lot of your ideas are in the private sector. So how do you get around that as a viable candidate?
We're going to work with all of the unions. In fact, on my channel, I publicly interview folks who work with unions, who work in politics. We've got, for example, multiple law enforcement officials who are coming on to speak on behalf of their unions. Hundreds of unions have reached out and we're trying to sort through. Hundreds of union stewards are trying to connect with us, which we're organizing, we're doing the interviews. And the goal is, how can we work our plans here, which we know that our plans are win-win for California. How can we integrate our plans and work with unions to make them happen? We're not coming in trying to replace unions. I don't want to go to the building and safety workers in our country or within our state, for example, and say, that's it, you're all gone, we're coming in with a new system. No. We're not doing, a Terminator here and replacing. What this is get the government out of the way so we can actually empower the professionals to do their job and make a change. And by me expressing these ideas, I get thousands of messages from teachers going, Kevin, thank you. I am tired of the same curriculum that leads students into failure. They don't want what Newsom tells them to do now. It's demeaning because we're not making any progress. We need big new ideas. and I'm going to have win-win solutions with unions throughout the state to make them happen.
What about critical race theory?
Well, so critical race theory and wealth inequality, in my opinion, is a very, very complicated issue in our society. I think it is very bad that we have racial wealth gaps, unemployment wealth gaps in general, wealth gaps that have been perpetuated by COVID. There are massive, massive issues in our society. I think the best way to address many of our issues is through our future schools by providing
Would
education.
you teach critical race theory in future schools?
My future schools vision is all about financial education and skills. To me, financial education is actually completely colorblind. If everybody knows that they can build wealth through home ownership, for example, safe home ownership with 30-year fixed rate debt, guess what we don't have? We don't have the New York Times doing articles anymore about how the average net worth of a black person is $7,500 and the average net worth of a white person is $175,000, and the difference is correlated directly to racism and home ownership. This ends when we have financial education and equal opportunity in our country.
I agree with you completely in that, we need to embrace capitalism. We need to embrace wealth creation. That's what lifts people out of poverty. That is cut and dry. That is cause and effect. That is not my opinion. That is data. You have to embrace that. But you are coming up against an era where critical race theory is rooted, it is an offshoot of Marxism that despises capitalism, despises private property ownership, and thinks that private property should be redistributed along racial lines. So, you are up against a philosophy that has taken root in California. And although your ideas are incredibly practical and optimistic and would benefit anyone who gleans them, especially in adolescence, I don't know how you overcome the Marxists.
The way we overcome specific issues in California is actually very simple. When the mass of our population desires change, we can institute our initiative process and our state can vote on exactly what we want. My belief is that there are very, very polarizing issues in our society today, specifically in politics. There are certain phrases that immediately upset half and excite the other half.
Yeah, that's what they're designed to do. It's left brain thinking. If you've read The Divided Brain.
And that's not what I stand for. What I stand for is look at the problems we have. Homelessness, housing, traffic, education, taxation. Those are the big five. 4 of those are states of emergency, which I'll be declaring on day 1. So when we look at those issues themselves and we realize that these issues can actually solve many of the other questions. For example, I get asked all the time, well, here's another divisive one. What about immigration? Well, our immigration process is a disaster.
It is.
It's so hard to have easy, streamlined, legal immigration.
It shouldn't be.
So of course there's more illegal immigration.
Amen.
The entire system's broken.
It is.
Government needs to get out of the way.
Yes.
We need to streamline our processes, make everything easier. But it all starts with the big 5 core issues. And I promise you, solving these 5 issues, once these 5 issues are solved, nobody's going to be asking me about illegal immigration anymore. Nobody's going to be asking me about critical race theory anymore, because the 5 issues are going to solve all of the issues that boil up the other problems, in my opinion.
Well, no matter what happens with this race, keep fighting, keep pushing, find ways to get these ideas into conversations. Parents need to have these conversations. Business owners need to have these conversations. Kids need to have these conversations with each other. Some of my very favorite conversations I have throughout the day are with my daughters about what they learn in school, what they talk about with their friends, what scares them the most, what inspires them. And you'd be amazed because they are so much more tapped into things than I think a lot of adults give them credit for. And I like the way you're thinking. And, I like where you're landing on a lot of this stuff because it is all very much rooted in freedom. So I wish you well Kevin, I think you are onto something very real and very exciting. So please keep me posted, okay?
Yes, and I have a quick question for you. What do you think about a public, all government contracts for things like roads or tunnels, like the bid selection process, being public? I was even thinking, we have cryptocurrency, blockchain, smart contracts, where, hey, we can rank things based on quality and based on cost, and all of a sudden we get the cronyism out. How important is that, do you think, to you and your viewers?
I think it's very important. And I think anytime you can create more transparency and create more choice, and anytime there is ranking in terms of expenditure where people get to say where their money goes, I think that is certainly a net positive. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. You really are impressive, and I'm going to keep watching all of your videos. Meet Kevin on YouTube. Kevin Paffrath, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. It was a blast.
This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy.